Say there, Amity. Since you've provided us with meal, why not also provide us with entertainment? Yes, I mean you are a storyteller. Why not perhaps tell us a story?
Um, all right, but okay, if I'm going to do it, and if you're not going to show us any of your magic, then how about we all do it? I mean, we all come from such different places. I'm sure we all have something to tell. Maybe like some kind of chilling campfire story.
Oh, that would be quite an intrigue, wouldn't it?
I think I can come up with something.
Should I go first so that you all have time to come up with something?
That would be appreciated.
If you don't mind, I mean, you've done so much for us already.
Amity is a little bit confused at the extremely lauding praise from Lillisen, but takes it in stride and says, all right, this is the scary, scary story of the frogs and the ox. Once upon a time, there was a young frog getting a drink in a pool, and an ox came along to the pool to drink as well, and as he splashed into the water, he crushed the young frog into the mud, and the frog died instantly. She sort of makes spooky hand motions. Now, the frog's father missed his son, and he asked his other children what had become of him. One of them piped up, "A great big monster! He stepped on my little brother with one of his huge feet." And the father said, "How big was he? Was he as big as this?" And he puffed himself up, inhaling and making his stomach round like a big medicine ball. "Oh, much bigger!" his children cried, and he puffed himself up even more. He couldn't have been bigger than this," said the father. But the little frogs again declared that the monster was much, much bigger. And the frog puffed himself out again and again, breathing in more and more air. His skin stretching tight, until all at once he burst into little pieces. And the moral of the story is, do not attempt the impossible.
Well, don't fill yourself up with hot air.
That's a good one.
Earthrendeer claps. That is a classic little folktale. Very good choice.
Lillisen is just like staring in horror.
You're right there, love.
That is quite the moral to attach to a tale in which two people die for no reason.
Oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have gotten into it after all the mess about the berries.
No, it's okay.
People die for no reason every day. I think it's a great story, love.
Amity sort of shivers. Ethrendir, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. You seem to know a lot of folk tales and history and stuff. Do you have something good?
It's a Earthrendeer, and I think I do. Although it's not as child-friendly. It's more of a historical record, actually, or something like it.
That sounds lovely.
Okay. Well, I'll give it my best shot, then. He closes his eyes and begins to talk. Many years ago, about 700, when the world was younger and simple and clean, there was a man who lived alone in the middle of the woods. His name was Taylor, and he prized his independence like a fine wine, and rarely, if ever, had visitors. One day, Taylor had two dear friends visit him from the city. In those days, there was a war, and they appreciated the comfort of the countryside. Taylor grumbled at the company, but tolerated it, for his friends had brought wine and cards, and he always enjoyed a game of two, along with their company. And so Taylor dealt the cards and poured the wine, and for a few hours, the woods were a merry place. In the haze of wine and good company, Taylor's memory became foggy, and he only got bits and pieces of what was happening. Suddenly, there was the sound of raised voices, and then the crash of a table, and then the drip of liquid against the floorboards of his cabin. When he came to, he found that the card table was knocked over, the lantern they had been using to play shattered, and his friends, the few folks he was willing to tolerate, his friends were slumped on the ground, their blood pooling and mixing with the lamp oil. Each of them had been stabbed, and Taylor found himself holding a bloody dagger in his hands. He pauses for a moment. They say his scream was so loud that people heard it in the next county, and that a flock of ravens who had been roosting nearby took to the air and began repeating the scream, calling as they left. And so he ran, dagger still clutched in a death grip, bumbling through the woods, back to the city, back to the place he abhorred, muttering all the while, I'll turn myself in. I'll go to the magistrate, and they'll know what happened and who did it, and we'll see justice done. It'll work. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And so he repeated this mantra as he ran. But when he got to the city, all he found was rubble and the smell of smoke. The war had finally reached it, and everything was gone. And so Taylor sat, clutching the dagger in his hands, looking at where the magistrate's office had used to be, and wept for many long hours in the dark of the night. And then walked into the woods, and was never seen again. He brushes the hair out of his eyes and sits back. It's not a happy story, but it's an important one, I think.
Is it a true one?
To an extent. From everything I've gathered from historical records, there really was a man named Taylor who came wandering into an adjacent city, babbling about something that he'd done, but no one quite knows. The line between folktale and story and truth is thin, especially with my people.
That was so eloquently told. It's like you memorized it.
I did. It's something I'm good at. But thank you. That's really kind. I appreciate it. And, well then. How about you, Lillison? You seem like you'd have some good stories to tell.
Lillison smiles kind of awkwardly, and she says, well, I don't know any scary stories like what you just told, but here's one that I suppose tends to horrify people. Once upon a time, there was a girl who wished to become beautiful, but she did not know how. So she thought, I will go to the most beautiful beings in the world, the birds, and I will beg them to teach me. First, she visited Dove, and she asked him how she could become beautiful. Dove said, you must have plumage of pure white, and only then can you be as beautiful as me. The girl said, but I have skin, not feathers, and it will not turn white. Then you will never be beautiful, said Dove. Next, she visited Heron, and she asked him, how can I become beautiful? Heron said, you must have long, slim legs. Only then can you be as beautiful as me. The girl said, but if my legs were as slim as yours, they wouldn't bear my weight. If you'd rather be able to walk than pursue perfection, then you will never be beautiful, said Heron. Next, she visited Nightingale and asked him how she could become beautiful. "Sing for me," said Nightingale. But after the girl had sung a few notes, the bird shook his head. "You must have a sweet voice to be beautiful," he said, "and your case is hopeless. Go home. Do not bother anyone else." It was a bitter walk home, but awaiting her there, right before her door, was Peacock, the most magnificent of all birds. "I heard about your quest," said Peacock, "and I came to tell you that you are already perfect, just as you are." The girl could not believe her ears. "How can you say that about me when you are as beautiful as the sun?" "My girl," said Peacock, "you, exactly as you are, could never rival my splendor. That is why you are perfect in your natural place and should never try to change, because this way you will never be a threat to me." Then the girl realized that Peacock had given her the answer she wanted. She would be the most beautiful creature in the world if she could just get rid of anyone who rivaled her beauty. So she took her bow and arrows, and she shot Dove, and she shot Heron, and she shot Nightingale, and last of all she shot Peacock and plucked out his feathers to make into a fine cloak. And then everyone said she was the most beautiful maiden who has ever lived.
Well,
I love it. It's almost hilarious. I like that.
Hilarious is one word for it.
That was a lovely story. I do see what you mean about it being a bit morbid. Beautiful, though. You did a wonderful job. You're a good storyteller. But good
Thank you.
gracious.
yeah, that one was a bit dark, wasn't it?
I thought that was the point.
Oh, no, yes, by all means, terrify us. That's what we're here for. I'm sure you, though, Kiva, have something up your sleeve, yes? Something dark and macabre?
Well, I'm not sure how dark and macabre it is. It's a favorite story from when I was a child, so I guess I can share that. Kiva sits up a little bit and clears her throat. There was once a kind young prince whose favorite pastime was sitting underneath a willow tree in the woods. One day, he heard a soft voice coming from the water next to the tree. It was a mermaid, asking the young man if he was king of the land. He proclaimed that one day he would be, and upon looking at the lady in the water, knew he wanted her to be his queen. They spoke of life, of each other's homes, and of love. But deep down, they both knew that their meeting was tragic. She needed water, and he needed air. He promised her he would think of a solution, a way that they could both be together, and set to work. Days later, with joy in her heart, he returned to the water by the willow and declared that a moat was the answer, a way to unite their lands. But the prince had an uncle who wanted the throne, and there drowned the prince and returned to the castle alone. Night fell, and the mermaid emerged. "My sweet prince," she cried happily. "Is it true? You've decided to give all this up and live here with me?" Well, she kissed his waterlogged face and pulled his body against hers, dragging him underneath the surface. And that kind young prince, whose favorite pastime used to be sitting underneath a willow in the woods, now lived with his bride on the floor of the sea, staring blankly at the world above.
That's haunting.
In retrospect, it probably isn't the best story to read to a child, but I liked it a lot.
My mother always said that the best stories for children are the scary ones. That way that they'll know that the world is scary already, and they know that they can try and fight it. So in that respect, I think it does a good job.
I think
Kiva
it's rather
almost
sweet.
rubs her hand on the scars on her face as Ari's saying that and nods a little bit. She's looking very comforted by those words, actually.
Well, I guess it's my turn now, isn't it? And Metreon goes, kind of drags the log that he had found with the pelt on it, and just sits up by the fire and takes up the water skin and takes a sip. Well, I actually once had a friend who belonged to a well-to-do family. He and his younger brother were the wandering types, and often left the comforts of their family estate to seek out adventure. Exploring was his passion, was being the operative word, and for good reason. On his last expedition, he and his brother plotted a trip to the legendary Silverwood. They had been warned that its thick greenery and native trolls would prove a formidable challenge, but they were eager to know what, if anything, they could uncover. So, when they went, though, they found that the woods were curiously silent the day that they entered, and it was 2 more days before they found anything of interest. Eventually, they came upon the hollowed out remains of an old elven home. It appeared as though the forest had taken most of the original structure over, but as they delved deeper, they uncovered a well of hewn white stone. They tossed a shard down into the darkness and listened keenly as the coin splashed into the water. There was an empty wooden bucket and working pulley, and they tossed the bucket down after the coin. Moments later, they pulled the bucket up, and it was filled with crystal clear water. Adventurers that they were, both of them drank from it. The water tasted sublime, and any exhaustion they felt from the day's travel seemed to melt away. Both of them eagerly filled their water skins and with renewed energy set up camp for the evening. While exploring the ruins further, they happened upon an old journal. The author of it was a young elven girl, raised with a younger sibling and 2 caring parents. One passage in particular caused their brows to raise, though. In it, she spoke of a well that her family secured and the water that flowed beneath the house, and its restorative properties. As she put it, the water we've discovered can mend even the most broken things. Excitedly, they rushed back to the well, eager to test her testimony out. Her brother took up a bundle of twigs and snapped them over his knee, and tossed them into the bucket. They lowered the broken branches down into the darkness and submerged them. A few moments later, they pulled the bucket up from the well, and inside, sitting in the water, were several solid branches. They were stunned, but wondered if the water's benefits could affect them outside of this hidden reservoir. His brother unsheathed his longbow and snapped it in half, just as he had the branches before. He held the pieces together and urged my friend to pour the contents of their water skin over the seam, and sure enough, the water healed the bow's broken limbs. They forced themselves to rest, though the excitement of their discovery made it incredibly difficult. In the morning, they awoke to find 3 hares successfully felled by their traps. As my friend continued over the diary, his brother decided to test the limits of the water with one of the hares. He placed the carcass in the bucket and lowered it down and waited to hear something. While he tested this theory out, my friend finished reading the diary. In the diary, the author mourned the death of her brother, and the journal seemed to abruptly end, its final entry being something about claiming to see her brother standing outside her bedroom window in his burial vestments. As my friend finished reading, his brother rushed back to him with a wriggling hare in hand. "I did it," he exclaimed. They freed the 3rd hare and dined on the other 2 before they set off to explore more of the surrounding woods. Not long after leaving camp, they were both surprised by a troll. Though both men managed to slay it, the brother was left a gory mess. Thankfully, though, they had refilled their water skins. My friend poured 2 skins worth of that healing water down his dying brother's throat, and in minutes, his brother's body began to mend itself. Something followed that euphoria, though. Just as quickly as he stood fully healed, he crumpled over back down to the ground. He clutched his gut before screaming at my friend, "Oh, there's something inside." My friend was petrified and watched as his brother took the dagger from his boot and began to tear into his own belly. Both men gasped as a small shriek echoed through the woods. From out of his open gut squirmed a small, bloodied hare. I didn't believe my friend at first. That was until he showed it to me. You see, he knew no one would believe him. He knew I doubted, and so he revealed he had kept something from his expedition. He promised it to me under the condition that I would share his tale far and wide to caution others, just in case others such as ourselves might be skeptical. He gave me that damned hair, and at that point, Metrion takes the pelt that he's been sitting under and throws it over at Amity, and just starts to giggle like a schoolboy.
Yay!
Oh, that is. Oh, you are. That is an excellent way to do that. That is. I half expected you to pull a real hair out of a hat or something.
Well, I'm not wearing a hat now, are I? But, you know, once I get one, both a hat and a hair, you know, I might finagle something.
Amity is laughing now, and throws the pelt back with as much force as she can.
You are joking, right? That's not actually the pelt. That was just a story, right?